The chief lesson that I learned then in this wonderful experience is, and it came directly from speaking to citizens more than politicians, a village is not a government. A village is an idea. A village is a sense of place. A village is a community. And what I'm going to propose today, going beyond the first proposal that I made of just everyone reducing by 2 politicians, based on this experience, I have to tell you, it's time that we here in Erie County consider each of these 16 village governments, not the villages. They want you to look at it as if they're the same. Not the village, but each of the 16 village governments should be merged into their surrounding towns. That won't reduce services, that won't make it less, it'll strengthen it. It won't reduce identity, it won't reduce brand, it'll strengthen it. And I'm proposing today, and I sent a letter to each of the 16 village mayors throughout Erie County, asking them to get together all at once and to start talking about this and agree in a measured and responsible way on a date certain by which we can accomplish this. And think of not only, again, beyond the money we would save, the restoration in people's minds and citizens' minds that once again we can change something here. Because when we lose that capacity to change, you know what happens. When you can't change, you die. Because we all have to remember, and my father taught me this. Some of you here knew my dad. He was great, great American, great father. And he used to say to me, Kev, please don't go into politics. Please, for the love of God. But if you do, make me one promise. Always remember that whether you're in a town hall or the halls of Congress, the purpose of government is to touch someone's life, to solve a problem, to ease a suffering. And what I'm arguing and asserting in this experience is that all the noble efforts of our politicians to do that on our behalf are being undermined and weighed down by the system that's eating up too many of the resources as a result. Now, we've had some fun with Frank Capra here today, and I've always admired him. He's another one of my great heroes because he escaped Eastern European oppression and came here and spent his whole life making films, tributes to American democratic institutions, including that wonderful film, it's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Here's my favorite scene from it.
From these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
I know most of you are too young to remember, but I'm old enough to remember when the state of New York was considered the most dynamic, forward-looking, fun, sexy, progressive, terrific place to live. But we've ceded that position now to other states around the country, and the reason is because it's too expensive to do business here. And it's too expensive to do business because property taxes are too high. And property taxes are too high because local government costs too much. And you know something? What I just said there, we all know. And we've known it for a long time. And heaven help us if we pass the system on now to yet another generation and burden them without doing something about it. My father also used to say that anytime people were kind enough to let you blah, blah, blah at them for a while, you better give them one story or one song or one poem that perhaps you've never heard before. So I'd like to close with one story here about Abraham Lincoln in our waterfront, which perhaps you've never heard. I'd never heard this story until a couple of years ago. Some of you are here tonight. We all did it together when those bureaucrats were going to bury the western terminus of the Erie Canal right outside our window here. And I had a little conference on the history of the Erie Canal, and together we saved it. And during the course of putting the conference together, I found these great speakers around the country who are heritage development and cultural development experts and Erie Canal experts, including a woman named Carol Sheriff, who wrote a great book called The Artificial River, The History of Erie County, of the Erie Canal. And I went to see her down in William and Mary College, and I wanted her to come to speak. And I was sitting in her office, and she gave me some lame excuse that she was pregnant or something. And so I was just pestering her, and I was trying to keep the conversation going, and finally she looked up and she said, well, you know, when I was in Buffalo doing research for my book, God, I love that city, I love that people, and you must be so proud of your harbor wall along the shore. And I said, oh yeah, we're really proud of our harbor wall. And she said, you don't know the story of your harbor wall, do you? And I said, no, ma'am. And she told me the story. About halfway through the Civil War, the most astonishing slaughter of young men in the history of mankind, even the most abolitionist states started sending delegations of folks to go see Lincoln from New York, from Massachusetts, from Indiana, and they'd go down to the White House and they'd say, look, you got to stop. We can't take it anymore. We've lost all the boys that we have. We're not going to give you any more boys. It's got to stop. And Lincoln got angry. And he turned to them and he said, this is all in Carroll's book. He turned to them and said, look, let me tell you something. You put me up to this. It's the right thing to do. We're going to see this through. And then he turned to a military aide that he had, and to me, affirmation of what a great gift from God Lincoln was. And he said, hey, listen, do me a favor. Do a little research. Find out which communities in America have sent us the most boys, and which communities, as a matter of population, have lost the most boys. Buffalo was number 2 on that list. And in acknowledgement of that, Abraham Lincoln said, go up there and find out what we can do for them. The harbor wall that we can see outside this window, from Lackawanna to the Black Rock Channel, is a gift from Abraham Lincoln to the city of Buffalo in exchange for what we did to save the Union. And what makes the story so wonderfully poignant is he made the promise, but then of course he was murdered, and it was such a powerful gesture that 5 successive presidents honored it. And on the day in 1901 when Theodore Roosevelt signed a piece of paper authorizing the last payment, it was the longest harbor wall in the world, and to this day it's considered, if you speak to the Army Corps of Engineers, the most well-built, which requires the least amount of maintenance. So every time I look at it, it serves for me as a wonderfully powerful reminder that this is a Western New York community that merits protection and sustenance and celebration. And that's why I do this work. This work is not a community gesture, it's not a government work. I like to think of it just merely as a civic prayer, and one that we all actually pray together every time we stand up for one another, every time we advance this community. We always just pray in one voice, Western, as it was in the beginning, it is now and forever shall be. Western New York without end. Amen. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much.